heredity and evolution. It's heredity. What does heredity mean? Heredity means as we observe all the organisms around us, the organisms, all the organisms, they look similar to their parents. This is a property, inherent property of all the organisms. They have some similarities owing to their parents. Okay. They also show, or all the organisms, they also show some of the dissimilarities or differences between them. For example, even if we find two dogs or two puppies around you, so they will show variations. Okay, there will be some variations within them, and also they will look similar in some way. Even if you try to find out the similarities of the puppies will be more with their parents. In some cases, you may be able to identify their parents because of their appearances, because of their habits. So, what is heredity? There are many questions which are answered by this heredity. That suppose if you think why uh, why does a dog's baby always look like a dog? Why doesn't it look like a cat? Okay, so there must be some process by which by which the factors are being controlled. The characteristics of an organism, they are controlled. All the characteristics of an organism, they are controlled by certain factors. So in this chapter, first of all, we will discuss about the characteristics of an individual. So what are the different characteristics? So if we observe any organism, we observe that organism's color, observe that organism's height, we can observe that organism's weight, we can observe intellect of that person, we can observe hair color of the person. If we are observing, suppose cats, we can observe the strips which they bear on their body, what is their average size, okay, what is their average lifespan. So these are all the characteristics which we observe in an individual. And on the basis of these characteristics, we find out the differences and similarities in the organisms. Right? And still, Tanishka and K. Subha Chavik, your cameras are not on.
Sir, just
Has-
1 minute, sir. I'm trying to join through a different device also. I'll turn my camera on in a second.
Okay, fine. Manan?
Sir, just join the class. I'll on it in 2 minutes.
Okay, fine.
So
So,
just a few minutes alone.
okay. So, in a very simple way, suppose if I see a mustard plant, okay. So, what are the characteristics that you look for the mustard plant? That means what on what basis can you identify the mustard plant? What characteristics you look? You look for the flower color or the flower color. We can see the seed size. Okay. The seed size may be small, may be big. We can see flower color. We can see height of the plant, height of plant. So in the similar way, there are a number of characteristics which we study in the case of mustard plant. If you say a pea plant, so in the case of pea plant, again we identify a number of characteristics. In the pea plant also, we can see here flower color. We can see flower color, pod size. What is the pod size? Then seed shape, seed size, seed color, tallness or height of the plant. So these are the different characteristics which we observe in the case of pea plant. So different in if you observe any plant, there are different characteristics of which we can talk of. Similarly, if you talk of human beings, okay. So what are the characteristics that you observe in the case of human beings? Yeah, Manan, can you tell some of the characteristics which we observe in the case of human beings?
The characteristics like what?
Any characteristics which we see in the case of human beings? Any characteristics of human beings?
Your side.
Okay. We can identify human beings on the basis of their skin color. We can say about the skin color. We can also talk of their hair color. We can talk of average weight. Uh, we can talk of the intellect of the person. Dhruv, Hasnita, Rene, all these cameras are off.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, what about the eye color in human beings?
Yeah, eye color. That's your color of iris actually, which we call as the eye color.
Even average height also, sir.
Okay, average height. So these are some of the characteristics on which we can identify people. Now, out of these characteristics, the number of fingers, there are some people who have 6 fingers. Okay. So, out of these, see, there are certain characteristics out of this, if we observe, so there are certain characteristics which we inherit from our parents, which are inherited from the parents, and there are certain characteristics which are not inherited from the parents. That means those characteristics, they cannot be transferred from one generation to the other generation. Okay. So there are certain characteristics which can be transferred from one generation to the other, and there are certain characteristics which cannot be transferred from one generation to another generation. Like if you observe in the case of human beings, we have written a property here, intellect. Okay. So is this property transferable? Is it necessary that a doctor's son will be a doctor?
No, sir.
A lawyer's son will be a lawyer. It's not necessary. And will he owe the same skills? Will he owe the same characteristic? The answer is no. Okay. It's also not necessary that a swimmer's son will be a swimmer. Okay. So there are certain characteristics which an organism learns from the environment. It learns from the surroundings, which it learns through its lifetime. So those characteristics, they are called as acquired characteristics. So now we talk of all these characteristics, we can classify them under two categories. And the categories are either we can say a characteristic to be acquired characteristic. Acquired characteristics and inherited characteristics. So there are certain characteristics which we acquired from our parent, and there are certain characteristics which we learn from our surroundings. Okay. So what characteristics are the acquired characteristics? Rene, what characteristics we call as the acquired characteristics?
The acquired characteristics can be defined as like If
Mhm.
someone's parents has like brown eyes, their child could possibly have brown eyes.
No, these are not acquired characteristics.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry, like intellect.
Yeah, intellect is an acquired characteristic. Swimming skills are acquired characteristics.
Also, skills learned from your
Hmm.
surroundings and from other people, those can be acquired characteristics.
Okay, so we define here characteristics which an organism learns. Characteristics which an organism learns during his life. Lifetime is an acquired characteristic. So what about suppose if a person loses his arm or loses one of his fingers while working? So what would you call such a characteristic? An acquired characteristic or inherited characteristic?
Acquired characteristic.
Okay, so that is an acquired characteristics. So everyone has understood about the acquired characteristic and the inherited characteristic. Mehak, what are inherited characteristics?
So the characteristics which we have like obtained from our parents.
Yeah, characteristics that an organism inherits from parents. So the characteristics which an organism inherits from the parents are called as inherited characteristics. So can you give any example of inherited characteristics? Inherited characteristics, can you give any example?
Sir, height,
Which one?
sir,
Health.
height.
Yeah, health, height of a person is an acquired characteristic. Okay. Height, weight, all these are acquired characteristics. However, in some cases, it may be affected genetically also. It may be affected genetically, but most of them is acquired. Then the
Eye
skin
color.
color, yeah, the eye color, skin color,
Hair
all of
color.
them, yeah,
The hair
hair,
color also.
yeah, hair color, hair texture, all these are inherited from the parents. Okay. So, in this chapter, basically, we will be studying about the inherited characteristics and how these characteristics are transferred from one generation to another. So, here we define another term, inheritance. What is inheritance? It is the transfer of characteristics from one generation to the other. So, what is inheritance? The transfer of characteristics from one generation to the other is called inheritance.
So what is
So,
the difference between inherited characteristic and inheritance?
see, just a difference of the phenomenon. Inheritance is the phenomena of the transfer of characteristics, how the characteristics are being transferred. And inherited characteristics, it refers to the uh, characteristics. Inheritance is the phenomena, it is the process of how the characteristics are transferred.
Okay.
So, Okay, so we have understood here that how the characteristics will be transferred. Now, before that, before moving into the depth of again the characteristics and everything, we will have a small idea. Again, we will visit our reproduction. Just now we finished the reproduction chapter. So in the reproduction chapter, we had learned something about the chromosomes. Okay, over there we learned something about the chromosomes. And in the asexual reproduction, over there, if you observe during the asexual reproduction, there was a process of DNA copying. Do you remember? We had just discussed a little bit about DNA copying process. And it was the DNA copying process. If there is any error during the DNA copying process, maybe around 5%, 2%. So whatever error occurs during the process of DNA copying, so it is during that process that some variations may arise in the asexually reproducing organ. Okay. So those are that means here our chromosomes carry some information. Chromosomes carry the information which are to be transmitted from one generation to another. Okay. And that information, that hereditary unit is called as a gene. So here we define another term, that is gene. What are genes? Genes, they are hereditary units. They are hereditary units Genes are hereditary units present on chromosomes. Now, in the case of sexually reproducing organism, in the case of sexually reproducing organism, there is the process of DNA copying also. Along with there is another process, that is they have the mixing of the nuclear material. Mixing of nuclear material means there is mixing up of the chromosomes. That is the chromosomes of the male parent and the chromosomes of the DNA pair, chromosomes of the female parent. Both of them, they fuse together. They combine in another nucleus to form another nuclei, and hence in the sexual reproduction there are more chances of variations, but there are less chances of variation in the case of asexually reproducing organisms. So understood these two concepts clearly? What are genes?
Yes, sir.
Sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. So it is the sexual mode of reproduction from where a number of variations are arising. So now we will discuss about Mendel's experiment. How did Mendel discuss about the heredity? Apart from Mendel, who were the other scientists who were studying about the heredity, who were thinking about the heredity? We will also hear just a little bit idea of Lamarck's theory. So anyone has heard about Lamarck's theory? Yes. Anyone, if anyone can tell me the Lamarck's theory. No one? So there was a famous experiment with the Lamarck's theory. Lamarck put forward a theory that the use and disuse of organs creates a variations. Over a period of time, it creates variations. So do you agree with this? Use and disuse of
Sir,
organ
could you
will cause
repeat, sir?
use and disuse of organs, it causes variations. Like he thought that currently we see giraffes which have long neck. Okay. He thought that the giraffes, they were originally goats, and they were goats which were living in the desert areas, and they were not able to eat the leaves of the long trees. and hence with their efforts in generations, the neck of the goat grew longer and it converted to giraffe. So this
Sir,
was
but that's a different thing, right? So that's evolution. How
yeah.
can
So no need to worry. We are going just having an idea. Even Lamarck's theory was not there in your syllabus. I'm just giving you an idea of the Lamarck's theory.
yes, sir.
So it's always better to have a knowledge a little bit more. Okay. Like if you see, you have heard about the iron pillar, right? How many of you have heard about iron pillar?
Yes, I
Okay.
did.
So what is the property of the iron pillar?
It does not rust.
It does not rust. And can you expect a question from that topic in your board exam? It was there last year. Okay. So, and it's not out of the book. If you observe in the NCRT, they have given. So
It was
just
given
have
in
an,
NCRT, sir, in a box.
yeah, in a box, it's given in the NCRT. Okay. So here we will be starting with the accumulation of the variations. And that's why I was discussing about Lamarck's. Then we'll see heredity. We just saw inherited characteristics and acquired characteristics. So here is an example of variation. You can see here two types of ear a person can have. The ear lobes. They are not ear, they are the ear lobes. So one is an attached ear lobe, the other one is a free ear lobe. The first one, if you see here in the first one, the ear lobes are free. In the second one, the ear lobes are attached. Even the last end of the ear lobe is attached to the cheek. So these are the two variations in human beings with regard to the ears. Okay. So out of the two variations, it may happen that over a period of time, a variation may become permanent. A variation may be carried on permanently to be turned into evolution. Okay. Also here we will see that which variation has the more chances of being transferred to the next generation. Suppose the male has a attached ear lobe, the female has a free ear lobe. So which one will have a greater chance? Which one has the greater chances of being present in the young one? We will see that. So now we start with the Mendel's experiment. What did Mendel study, and how did he go about studying of the different factors? You see here, uh, let's see about Gregor John Mendel. So as you do not agree me to continue with Lamarck's theory, so I remove the Lamarck's theory from there. Okay, we will not study that. Let's study G.J. Mendel or Gregor John Mendel. Gregor John Mendel, he is also called as the father of genetics. So he obtained the Nobel Prize, Gregor John Mendel, and also called father of genetics. So why he is called as father of genetics, that we will see by his studies, what he studied. Father of genetics. So basically Mendel studied in the laboratory by considering the pea plant. As we know that a number of plants are available, but he chose the pea plant. Can you think of why would he have chosen a pea plant only? Why he chose a pea plant only? Why did Mendel choose pea plant?
Due to its variant characteristics.
We just see in the beginning of this chapter, we listed out characteristics of the pea plant, and we observe that there are a number of variations in the pea plant. Okay. If you observe the seed color, there are different seeds. There are two types of contrasting seed colors which are present in the pea plant. Either you can have a yellow seed or you can have a green. green pea. So these are the two variations of the pea plant. In the seeds shape also you have two variations, not seed size, seed shape. The first is seed shape. So there are two variations in the seed shape. You can have a round shaped seed or you can have a wrinkled shaped seed. So have you seen both of them? Round pea
Yes.
seeds and wrinkled pea seeds. Okay. Green pea seeds and yellow pea seeds. Just see how do they look like. We have round pea seeds. Here you can see pea seeds which are of different variety. See here in this picture, can you observe the two types of seeds? One are wrinkled and the other ones are green. Okay, and in them also some are some are wrinkled and some are round. That is their shape. And in them also some of them they are green and some of them they are yellow.
Yes, sir.
So this is what we have, a number of variations to study. We have a number of varieties to study in the pea plant. Okay. So that is why Mendel chose pea plant. Another thing that it had a very short lifetime. Pea plant can be grown in a period of 2 months only. So he could obtain the results quickly. He could obtain quicker results. So that is why he studied the pea plant. First of all, it had contrasting characteristics. Secondly, the pea plant could be grown in the laboratory easily for a shorter duration of time. So understood pea seeds or pea. We will also see height of the pea plant. So if you see pea seeds, Mendel. Let's see. These are all the crosses. No, not all the crosses. Basically, we are referring to these. Now, I think you have understood these. Okay. So, out of this, do you see any seed which is round? Can you see any seed
There
which
are
is
few, sir.
okay? Obviously, there are some seeds which are round. You have a green seed over here that's round and green. Okay. You see this one round and yellow. This one is round and green, round and green, round and green. These are wrinkled and green, wrinkled and yellow. So on the basis of these different varieties, he tried to study the pea plant. So first of all, he studied the height of the pea plant and then he went to all of them. So first of all, we will see the height of the pea plant. So pea plant, why Mendel chose pea plant? The reason behind is that first of all, it has a number of variations. So a number of variations are present in the pea plant. Okay. Then it is easy to grow in the laboratory, easy to grow in lab. Also, it has a shorter lifetime. So
Sir,
you can,
also because it's bisexual.
yeah,
Also because it is bisexual, so such that we can do
yeah,
self-pollination and
it's
cross-pollination
yeah,
also.
it's a bisexual flower. So it is bisexual. So hence, it is because of these reasons he chose the pea plant. First of all, in considering all this, first of all, he studied the height of the plant. So with the height of the plant, let's see what he observed. Here we also see about the phenotypic characteristics and the genotypic characteristics. Okay, so he took out two pea plants which were one was tall and the other one was dwarf. So he took a male pea plant and a female pea plant. The male pea plant, he took it to be tall, and the female pea plant, he took it as dwarf. Okay. Then he performed a cross pollination between them. When he performed a cross pollination between the tall plant and the dwarf plant, he obtained a tall plant. Okay. Now see the naming. How do we name it? This is the first generation, or we call it as the P1 generation. P1 means first parent generation. This is the first parent generation, which consists of a male and a female. The male is a tall plant, female is a dwarf plant. Understood? Okay. So which type of plant was obtained in the first generation?
Tall plant.
Tall plant. This is, we remark it as F1. F1 means first offspring generation. So this is your first offspring generation. First offspring. This is your first parent. So what the result was expected here? The result was expected that if he is taking a tall plant, if he is taking a dwarf plant, so the result expected was that here we should get a medium plant, a plant of medium height, right? This was the expectation. We had expected that in the first generation we would have obtained a medium plant, but there were no medium plants, there were no dwarf plants, all the plants were tall. Okay. So then he performed a cross pollination, a self pollination of these tall plants. A self pollination of all the tall plants was done. He performed a self pollination of all these tall plants, and in the next generation, what he observes over here, in the next generation, he observes that he has some tall plants as well as the dwarf plant. So this was your F1 generation, or we can also call it as P2 generation. P2 means second parent generation. Now they are also parents. Okay, they are also parents, so there are new individuals which have turned out of it. So the new individuals which turned out of it, they came to be both tall plant and dwarf plant. Both were present, which were obtained from these tall plants. Okay, so here Mendel, everyone got shocked that if we use the seeds of tall plant, here we are using all the seeds of the tall plant only, right? In the F1 generation or the P2 generation, all the plants were tall. So why in the second generation? Why in the F2 generation or second offspring generation, we are getting a dwarf plant? Where did we get this dwarf plant then? Okay, so it could not be explained that how we are getting a dwarf plant in the second generation. If there were no dwarf plant in the first offspring generation or the second of parent generation, there were no dwarf plant. So how did we get the dwarf plant? Now this was a clear indication that there are certain factors, okay, certain factors or certain substances which are being transferred from this P1 generation to the second P2 generation and then to the second offspring generation. Okay, so understood this much. What are the observations? What we got out of it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what we studied out of this or what we obtained over here was that we have the first parent generation, and from the first parent generation there are certain factors. Okay, So these characteristic, whatever we have chosen, these are called as phenotypic characteristics or phenotype characteristics. The phenotype characteristic of an organism, they are controlled by factors. Phenotype characters, they are controlled by certain factors. He called them factors at that time, to which we now call as genes. Now we call them as genes, but he termed them as factors. Okay, so there were certain factors or certain genes which were present in these plants and they were transferred to the offspring. Okay, from both the side, from the tall plant also and from the dwarf plant also. And both were present over there in this tall plant. In the F2, F1 generation, both the factors of the tall plants were also present and the factors of the dwarf plant were also present. Okay, but here only one of them showed, only one of them was represented, the other one was not represented. Okay. The one that represented itself, that was called as the dominant trait or dominant characteristic. Okay. So which one was represented? The tallness was represented. Okay, the tall factor was represented and it was called as the dominant. So this was the dominant one. Okay, understood? The one which was the dominant, that was represented at the F1 generation, and the factors of the dwarf, they were recessive in nature. They were suppressed by the dominant allele. They were suppressed by the dominant allele. So here both of them were present. Factors of the dominant are also present. Factors of the recessive are also present in this tall one. But only the dominant ones are showing. Only the dominant ones are being represented. The recessive ones, they are not represented. They are represented only when they find the opportunity. So in the next generation or in the F2 generation, we find a dwarf plant as over here the characteristics which were hidden out in the F1 generation, they got represented when the dominant alleles or the dominant factors were removed from them. Okay. So everyone has understood his experiment, Mendel's experiment
Yes, sir.
on the pea plant. Pea plant. Okay. So now you have some definitions about alleles, genes. Okay. So first we will look up at the definitions and then we will again come to the same experiment to understand this on the basis of the factors. Okay. Or on the basis of the genes. Okay. Yeah, Tanishka, what happened?
Nothing, sir.
Okay. See. So our first definition is gene. What can anyone define genes?
They are the hereditary units present on the chromosome.
Okay, they are hereditary units present on chromosomes. Right, very good. So I think this was Mehak.
Yes, sir.
So they were hereditary units present on chromosomes. And Mehak is doing well now. Mehak is studying. So the hereditary units present on chromosomes, the hereditary units present on chromosomes are called genes. So a gene represents a specific character. You can write here. A gene represents a specific characteristics. A gene represents a specific characteristics. A characteristic. So this was about gene. Then what are alleles? Yeah. Can anyone define alleles? I think you should be able to do, as in your schools, all these topics
They
have
are
been done.
different kinds or like the alternate forms of genes
Alternate forms of genes.
of a particular organism.
Anyone else? Sir, you can you define alleles?
Sir, I don't exactly remember the definition of this.
Okay. Anyone else?
So can we like tell them the particular characteristic present on the genes?
Not a particular characteristic, the different forms of characteristics.
So like if it's height, it will be tall and like dwarfness.
Yeah, the tall and dwarf, they are the two alleles. They are the two alleles of height. So two or more forms two or more forms of a gene that are found at the same time. They are the alleles. So for example, if we discuss for the characteristic height, so for the characteristic height, there are two alleles, that is tall and dwarf. They are the two alleles. So what is the dominant allele? What are the dominant alleles?
Pretty tall.
Just wait.
The one which is expressed out.
Yeah, just wait. So height is height is tall and dwarf. So these are the two alleles of the height, tallness and dwarfness. We are discussing about the dominant allele. Dominant allele and recessive allele. So which allele will be called as the dominant one?
So the one which expresses itself more when
Yeah. If both the alleles are present, so the allele which is presented, the allele which represent itself is the dominant allele. If an allele, if two alleles are present, two alleles of a gene are present, then the one which represent itself, then the one which represent itself, the one which represent itself is dominant allele. Okay. and the one which does not represent is recessive allele.
Sir, represent meaning what, sir?
Represent means it express itself. You can say express. Express is a better word. Okay. So you can say express, right? That is a better word. Okay, any other doubt? So if two alleles of a gene are present, then the one which expresses itself is the dominant allele. And the one which okay. So any other doubt? Dominant allele, recessive allele, alleles, genes, all these words are clear to you. Now we will see the certain forms. What are the different forms and how okay, so we will understand this experiment, the experiment which was done, this experiment, we will now try to understand this in the case of, with the help of the genes or the factors. So the same thing we are going to do now. We take the tall plant and the dwarf plant. The characteristics of the tall plant, they are represented by the gene capital T and capital T. Since the chromosomes are always paired, right? We know that the chromosomes are paired in an organism which are called as the diploid. So the chromosomes are initially in the diploid state. In any organism, they are diploid. So therefore, they will always be paired. So they are always paired. So this capital T, the symbolic representation, generally we take the symbol of the first letter of the characteristic to represent it. Since tallness is a characteristic and we want to represent the height, so out of this we take the T as the T, tallness is the dominant. So we take here capital T to represent it and small t to represent the dwarf ones. Now, your first process is the formation of the gamete. So during the gamete formation, here all the gametes which will be formed, they will be formed of the type capital T. Here all the gametes which will be formed, they will be formed of the type small t. Okay. Since it has only one type of chromosomes in it, it also has only one type of chromosomes in it. So therefore, there will be only one type of gametes which are formed. Okay. So then the fertilization will take place and the new gamete which will be formed, it will have the characteristics as capital T and small t. Okay. Now out of these two, the capital T is the dominant one and small t is the recessive one. So therefore, this plant is a tall plant. Okay. So everyone has understood up to this point.
Sir, I
These
have
are
a
the
doubt.
gametes. Yes.
Sir, how do you identify if it's a tall or a dwarf plant?
That was experimentally identified. So that is why we first did it experimentally, and now we are trying to uh, prove our hypothesis. Okay. that how it might have happened. Okay, so experimentally we found out here that the tall characteristic is the dominant one. That is why it was represented in the F1 generation. Okay, so your doubt is clear.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this experimentally he found out that uh, always every time you are getting all the tall plants, and he did not took just one seed. Okay, he did not take just one plant. He took a number of plants that was in 10,000s. He took the number of plants in 10,000s. Okay, and then used the probability approach. So here, if you are taking 20,000 plants, and in the first generation you are not getting a single dwarf plant, right? So that was the reason he did not took just one plant. That was done with 20,000 plants at the same time. Okay. So understood this? How we obtained this? Now this makeup which we obtained, this makeup is called as the genotype. The genetic makeup of the organism is called as the genotype, and its appearance is called as the phenotype. So we can write this as this is the phenotype. Okay. And this is genotype.
Sir, what is genotype?
Genotype, the genetic makeup of an organism. The genetic makeup of an organism is called genotype, and its physical appearance is the phenotype. The physical appearance of an organism is called the phenotype. Okay. Any other doubts? Okay. So which generation is this? This one is your P1 generation, first parent generation. This is your F1 generation or first offspring generation, or we can also call it as P2 generation or the second parent generation. Okay. Now, again, the gamete formation process will take place for these plants. When the gamete formation takes place for this plant, so now there are two types of alleles present here. There are two types of chromosomes which are present. So it will lead to the formation of two types of gametes. So there two types of gametes are formed now. Now you have a gamete of the type capital T and a gamete of the type small t. Right? Right? So in this stage of gamete formation, there are two varieties, not a single variety. There are two varieties. In the first stage, there was just one variety from each parent. But here, if you observe, from each parent, there will be two varieties. Okay. So let's see here. Again, you have the male and the female. But now in the male, you have two varieties or two types of gametes, capital T type and small t type. In the female also, you have two types of gametes, capital T type and the small t type. Now, what are the possibilities of combination? If you obtain the possibilities of the combination, so this capital T type, it can fertilize this capital T type, or this capital T type can fertilize this small t type. So it is capital T and capital T. It is capital T and small t. Here you have this small t again combined with this capital T. It can be one of the options. So you will have capital T, small t, or you can have another option is small t and small t. This is small t and small t. So as we have observed earlier, an organism with the genetic makeup capital T and capital T, this will be a tall plant. Okay. Tanishka, what type of plant will this be? Tall or dwarf?
Tall plant, sir.
Okay. So this one was also a tall plant. What about this one?
Dwarf plant.
Yeah, it is a dwarf plant. And the last one is a
Tall plant.
tall plant. So here the ratio that we get over here, that ratio is 3:1. Okay, that is, if you find the ratio of tall to dwarf, you have the ratio of 3:1, which we are getting by our hypothesis. Okay, and it was the same thing which he observed, which he obtained from the practical information. Practically also, when he did this experiment, he counted the number of tall plants, he counted the number of dwarf plants in the second generation. Okay, so this is your F2 generation or second offspring generation. This is your P2 generation or F1 generation. So he counted them, he found out the ratio that underlies between them, and that ratio also came out to be 3:1. Okay, so hence he got the significance that yes, this is how the information or characteristics are traveling from one generation to the other generation. Okay, so I hope everyone has understood up to here. Any doubts?
Yes.
Rene, any doubt? Mehak,
No, sir.
Sarayu?
No, sir.
Okay, fine. Okay, bye everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Right.